when we feel our pain, when we move through it, actually, it can really help us to navigate our forwards path.
Hey, I'm Tanya Wilkinson, and this is Death on the Daily.
There are some things in life that we think that if that ever happened to us, that we would never get through it alive. We simply wouldn't survive it. And I'm here today to share my story, just in the simple hope that if you are journeying through the unthinkable, that maybe my words and my experience might show you that there is a life on the other side. And for me, my unthinkable is the death of our daughter 5 months into pregnancy. And I'm going to come on to our story, and I'm going to come on to a promise of presence that I actually made to her in her final days, as well as actually how in the moment of her diagnosis and my floor falling out from underneath me, how I said those words to one of my dear friends. I said, I will not get through this alive. And she said something to me that made me see I could, I would, and that there was a life on the other side. So in today's episode of Death on the Daily, I'm going to be sharing more of my story. In fact, it's not just my story. It's that of me, of my darling daughter, whose name is Ngākau Raiona, and her name means lioness heart in my husband's Māori language, as well as obviously my husband as well. I'm going to be sharing all of our stories. And if you're new to the space, then welcome. Death on the Daily is all about talking about death and grief, bringing these conversations into the mainstream exactly where they belong. Because both death and grief are a natural part of life for us humans, has been since the dawn of our time. So I don't really understand why we don't talk about it more than we do. And through this channel, we're also going to be exploring all of the ways that if we can just find gentle presence with death and grief, that actually they can also become our greatest teachers into how we can live this life well. And I'm Tanya Wilkinson. I'm a grief and life transitions coach. And I'm obviously a bereaved mother. And my daughter is at the heart of everything that I do. Everything that I do through Death on the Daily, through my work, is building her legacy as much as mine. And if you want to join us in this journey, then I would love it if you could hit that subscribe button, as well as, depending on the platform that you're watching this on, maybe hit the like button, maybe add a comment, or drop me a rating and a review. All of that is so, so helpful for me and my little mission in this corner of the internet. So I thought I'd start by setting a little bit of context of who I had been before the transitional moment of losing my daughter, of going through and journeying forwards with grief just being an integral part of me. And actually in the before, I was a jet-setting corporate leader. I used to be one of the global heads of marketing for Formula One. And I would say that if I think about me and grief, I basically spent the first 3.5 decades of my life just routinely avoiding grief. In fact, I was conditioned to do so. My family is definitely one of this culture. This whole culture is death and grief avoidant, and my family followed suit. So as a result, I was always in avoidance mode. Whenever anyone would speak about grief, I didn't really know how to approach it, how to talk about it. I always felt really awkward. I was that person who would avoid the topic at all costs. And now I can see how harmful that was. And it was actually grief that led to my exit from Formula One, not the grief for my darling daughter, but actually the grief of an earlier miscarriage. And I've spoken about this on previous episodes that I will link here if you're interested in finding out more about that. But effectively, the grief of a miscarriage at about 6 weeks really shone a spotlight on, actually, did I really want to be here anymore? Is this my dream career? And I realized it wasn't. And I realized that actually there'd been whispers that had been bubbling within, but I'd just been ignoring them for at least 2 years that were telling me this is not for you. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. So that led to my exit from Formula One, and I'd retrained to become a coach. And I was doing the leadership and life coaching thing, as well as doing some consultancy, building my own business. And then in my first year of business, I actually ended up going on a journey with my darling granddad, and he ended up dying at the end of that first year. It was pretty much a year after I left Formula One, my granddad died. And that was after a year where I'd spent visiting his care home, see him and my nan every single Friday without fail. I was there. It was so beautiful and tender and difficult all at the same time, because both of them were on long journeys with dementia. And my granddad, in his final year, was basically me watching him waste away. And I'd made a promise to myself on all of those sacred days visiting my grandparents that I was going to meet them wherever they were. It was a big lesson that I learned. And again, as we can start to see, when we're present with the difficult, we can actually start to learn a lot of stuff about life in general. Because in me understanding that I had the capacity to sit, particularly with my granddad, who had a lot of stomach pains. He wasn't eating for the whole of the last year, he wasn't eating properly. And just witnessing everything that I was seeing and witnessing his discomfort was really uncomfortable for me. But I started to expand and realize I can hold this. And in holding this, I can also hold anyone else's pain in ways that I didn't realize that I could do before. So after my granddad died, I then went and decided to do some training. I actually trained to become an end-of-life doula. And I'd done the training actually in March in 2023. And then I think it was just over a month later, I found out that I was pregnant with our daughter. And this was after a long period of trying and hoping and praying for our baby to come in. Ever since 2021 was actually when I had my earlier miscarriage when I was in Formula One. So it'd been a long 2 years at that point. And at that point, I decided I'm going to put the death stuff to one side for now. It doesn't feel right. I'm in the birth space. But I didn't realize that actually I was going to become effectively my first, not really client, but the first person that I was going to support through what actually was for me the unthinkable. But after a really, on the whole, beautiful and flowing pregnancy, I felt so in the rhythm. I felt so connected to her. I knew she was a girl, actually. I knew she was a girl since, I think, before she was conceived. I was like, there's a girl coming in for sure. And everything was tracking well. The 12-week scan, in fact, the sonographer said everything looked perfect. A word that now I've come to realize there is no perfection in life, my daughter being one who has taught me this. So everything was tracking really, really well. And in my mind, I thought, okay, we got through 12 weeks. We are go. This is happening. She is coming in. And we get to the 20-week scan. It was actually, about 20 and a half weeks. I'm sure anyone who has ever had a pregnancy and been counting down the days knows that even though just those half weeks make all of the difference. And I was counting down to the scan. I was just wanted to get there, to see her, to hear her heart, which I absolutely loved. And we get to the scan. It's the Friday before the last bank holiday before Christmas in the UK. So it's the end of summer bank holiday. And we go into the scan, and the anatomy scan at 5 months takes a long time anyways. They're checking everything. But I suddenly realized everything was taking a lot longer than I thought it would. And the sonographer was very, very quiet. And I started to get quite anxious. And then he said, there's something that I can see on the back of her head. I don't know what it is. I can't diagnose. So I'm going to have to refer you to have a consultant. In the UK, the consultant is like the doctor, to do a scan next week, and they'll be able to advise what it is. So fast forward through the longest weekend of my life, and it was a bank holiday weekend. So it's a 3-day weekend. So we had to wait from Friday until Tuesday. I knew we had this follow-up appointment booked in for the Tuesday. And my heart is sinking as we are going into the room. I knew in my heart something seriously wrong. And the consultant says to us that she has a birth defect that is called encephalocele. It was on the back of her skull, which I believe is even more severe prognosis. And effectively, the severity of what she had meant that at best, she would live for 36 hours outside of the womb, if she even survived that long, because of the amniotic fluid not being so kind on exposed bits of tissue and other stuff. So my heart broke into pieces. I shattered in that moment. Who I was before just disappeared. The ground didn't just fall away from me. I was completely swallowed up. My worst fears in my life of losing a child who I had all of my imagined hopes and futures, and a child who was kicking in my stomach, losing that baby, it all came true in that moment. But I didn't just lose her, I also lost myself. I lost everything and all of my beliefs and the safety that I felt in this world, all gone in that instant. And I understandably, because when we go through something that is so painful, then it's totally understandable. And I want to stress this because I talk a lot about presence, that when I talk about presence, I'm not talking about 24/7 presence, because actually sometimes our body knows that we can't hold this right now. It's too much, it's too overwhelming. So in that moment, I disconnected, disassociated. The consultant said to me, "Are you okay? Are you here?" Was pretty much the vibe. And I was like, no, I'm not here. I'm not here. I'm out by the car. I'm waiting by the car. I want to go home. I don't want to be here. And so we got through the scan. We were told the choice that we had to make, which didn't really feel like much of a choice because of her prognosis. And obviously I am so empathetic to the multiple choices that we have to make in these situations. And for her, the decision was to go through with the termination for medical reasons. And what that involved at her stage of pregnancy was effectively an induction of labor. It's an ending of the pregnancy, then an induction of the labor, and then going through labor and stillbirth of our darling girl. So after the scan, my husband and I were in the car on the way home, and I was slumped back in my seat. And I'd actually just spoken to my friend, Christiana, who's a dear friend who's been on this podcast, actually, talking about her experience. And we spoke on the phone. I just shared the news. And I was telling her, Christiana, I will not get through this alive. I won't. And she was saying to me, you will. And I was like, there's not a hope in hell that I can get through this alive. It will kill me because of the weight that I was feeling right then. I literally, like someone had just pulled me apart. And she said, you will, because I went through it too. And I had no idea. I had no idea that she'd had to go through a termination for medical reason of a beloved and much wanted pregnancy. And just those words and being able to witness my beautiful friend who was living a life so full, albeit always with that scar, just made me in that moment realize I can do this. I can. And I just hung up the phone to her. We were still in the car, and that moment I felt our daughter kicking. Felt there was just the flutters moment of pregnancy where it was just in the previous few days before the scan, I started to feel it, and I was like, I know that that's her. And I felt her kicking. And I realized that although in just a matter of days, I was going to be saying goodbye to her, I realized that she is alive and she is kicking now. She is here. She is with me. And I didn't want to be anywhere but here with her too. So I made a promise to her. It was my mama's promise to her. Literally my heart just activated and I was just there. I was in it. And I whispered to her, I'm here with you, baby. I'm not going to leave you no matter what. I love you. And that was my mama's promise to her. I didn't know how it was going to pan out. I didn't know how I was going to get through it. I could see through my friend sharing her story. And that's why us sharing our stories as grievers and bringing this and raising this conversation is so important, because I could see through my friend. I had a mentor. I had someone who I could say, okay, I can see there will be life on the other side. But what I didn't realize is that actually from that moment of my promise to her, I have never been more present in my life, more viscerally present with everything than I have done in the 4 weeks from that point all the way through to her woodland burial. And I don't know how I managed to do it. And I'm not saying that I was 100% present always. Absolutely not. But what I can tell you is that I was riding those waves of grief. I was in it. I was feeling pain that I didn't even know humans had the capacity to hold it, because I'd always run away from the context that someday we might have to hold that type of pain. And from that moment, my choice was made. In this life, I choose presence over running away, over trying to escape my pain and escape stuff that is just so beautifully human in its own way, because this human existence is built of a wholeness, and everything serves a function and serves a purpose. There's a reason as to why we grieve. There's a reason as to why when we feel our pain, when we move through it, actually, it can really help us to navigate our forwards path. And what I discovered was I can really hold this. I can hold the unbearable. There's a wonderful book that I actually devoured in the early stages of my grief called Bearing the Unbearable by Joanne Cacciatore. And I love that title. I love the whole spirit and ethos and depth in the book, because I realized I could hold it all. And I realized that alongside my grief, that there was so much joy, that underpinning it all, there was love, there was meaning. There were funny moments where, as happens when you're grieving, you're going through the worst, something will just make you laugh. Or my husband is hilarious. He was just brilliant at cracking a joke at the most opportune of moments, and I would just be on the floor rolling around in laughter. So my joy in life felt deeper from that. My love in life felt deeper from that. I feel like the Grinch, where, you know, the heart expands. I've always felt like grief has created that effect on me. My heart has just grown and gotten bigger. Through the cracks in my heart, through the heartbreak that I felt, there's a swelling. There's a beautiful growing that has happened through my grief. And our daughter's name, meaning lioness heart in Māori, Ngākau Raiona. Actually, she, in just the 21 weeks that she was with us, and in her lasting imprint that will be with me for life, because we carry our grief forwards for life, she has taught me more than any other being on this planet. And obviously, I would give it all up in a second to have her here with me now, but I can't. And so in the absence of me being able to bring her back and to have walked a different path with her, I can be grateful for all of the gifts that she has and she continues to give me through the beacon of love that is my grief for her. And I wanted to make this into a shorter episode, but if you want to go into more depth in my story, I'm going to link part 1 and part 2, where I go through all of the depths of her stillbirth, her woodland burial, everything that I was experiencing and writing. As I described to the midwives in the hospitals, the contractions of grief to me really mirrored the contractions of labor, that intense pain where you think, I will not get through this. And then that release and that relief. So if you want to join me for those parts of my story, then I would love for you to check those episodes out. But I thought I'd end this episode with what my darling daughter has taught me. And I want to start with the lessons for us in our grief avoidant world. We live in a world where we are told to turn the volume down on grief, where we're told to avoid it, where if we're grieving, we're told to move on. We're told to be quiet in our grief. But what I've discovered through my own personal journey, as well as my work with all of my grief coaching clients and everyone who I sit in circle with, including in my Grief Cocoon monthly workshop, is that when we turn the volume down on our grief, we turn the volume down on everything in our life. In not allowing ourselves to feel not just grief, but any and all pain in life, in numbing out, in avoiding it, what that actually does is, I know that it puts us into just this kind of area in the middle, where if we're not allowing ourselves to feel the depths, we're also not allowing ourselves to feel the highs of our heights. And for me, actually, I felt joy more deeply in so many more of just the simplest of moments. This is for me one of the greatest lessons that death can teach us. It's that actually, It's time to stop taking this life for granted. It's time to stop taking these simple joys for granted. It's time to be present with it all. And I found that one of those gateways through to being present with it all, it has to be a willingness and an intention that I'm going to be here and I'm going to feel it all. And when I feel that pain and I want to run, I'm just going to find gentle presence with it. So what does this look like in the practical? When I work with clients, obviously, it's us talking about it. It's also us connecting into our body and understanding, where is my grief sitting within me? One of the things that I've done for my daughter, as well as my 3 grandparents, all of which died within the space of 3 and a bit years, is I can feel where each of them sits in my chest. And actually, my daughter's obviously right over my heart. I call her, and my grief for her is my tattoo of grief. I feel this tattoo every day. It's a beacon of my love. But I also can feel my granddad's over here. My nan and my amama are over here. I do truly believe that if you want to feel it all in this life, we have to make that commitment to be present. And the ways, as I shared, that we can do it is, talking about it, feel it in our body, as well as journaling. Also, what I found with finding presence with death and with grief is it really can spotlight what's most important to us in this life. Whether it's the grief of my miscarriage that spotlit that turning point for me to say, I am not loving this job. A job that for many would say, that's a dream job. One of the heads of marketing for Formula One globally. That's pretty cool. I realized it in my heart. My heart wasn't singing when I stepped into that office, when I turned my laptop on. And I knew that that was my time to make my exit. And actually, with each death that's come since, my granddad, then my daughter, then my nan and my amama, who both died within 6 days of each other last year, I've actually realized that each time I've had this lightning bolt clarity of, am I living my values? Am I living my truth? Am I prioritizing those who matter the most to me? And each time there's been a lot of letting goes that I've realized I've had to do, including after my daughter dying, realizing I needed to retrain and I needed to go all in on the grief space. Actually, this is where I want to be. So I know that, and I use the word gift. I don't want to use the word gift because nothing in us losing someone who we love is a gift. So I'm going to say that right now, if any of this is sounding like this is a gift that grief brings. But in the absence of me being able to have my daughter back, or me being able to have any precious time that I might have liked with my grandparents, in addition to the privilege of having them be there for such a long period of my life, I can connect into the fact that my grief didn't break me. In fact, it rearranged me. It rearranged me into a truer version of me. But equally, when we come back to that theme of presence, it needed my gentle presence to be present with grief, to be present with life, to be present with where those lightning bolts of clarity were coming down from the skies of grief to tell me something's not right, something's not in alignment. You have been gifted this life, a life that your daughter, this is how I see it, a life that my daughter didn't get to walk. What a privilege I have that I turned 40 this year, that I've got to walk this earth for 40 years and hopefully for many more beyond that. I will never take that gift for granted again. And what it's really made me be so laser focused on is, am I living this life well? Am I living it in alignment? Am I living it in prioritization of those and that which matters the most to me? And if not, as soon as I have that awareness, can I take action? Not saying that you need to change the world overnight like I did and just leaving Formula One, which was literally, it happened as soon as I realized. I think it was a matter of days before I handed my notice in. But even just taking little small steps and saying, what's one thing? What's one micro towards a better habit? Towards prioritizing my loved ones, my family, my friends, or whoever. What's that one small thing that I can do today? So just as 3 practical things that you can take away, if you wish to, from this episode. And these are things that have supported me, as well as those that support the clients who I work with. So first up, we're going to just do a little grounding practice. Because grief and those moments where the floor falls out from underneath us and in the long road beyond, they can be so dysregulating on our nervous system. So a really quick and scientifically proven practice that can help to regulate you is really as simple as this. Just putting a hand to your heart and just taking some breaths. You might like to close down your eyes or keep them open, because sometimes when we're grieving and when we're feeling dysregulated, it can be uncomfortable actually to go within, particularly if we've got anxiety or other stuff that might be bubbling within. So putting your hand to your heart, eyes open or eyes closed, and just taking some breaths. And just allow yourself to come back into you, to return back into this present moment. And then from this, hand to heart, and you can do this for as long as you like. Then second up, we're just going to notice. So with this heart connection, just asking of your heart, is there anything here that I haven't made space for that I need to? Just ask that question and observe without any judgment. Bring that awareness to say, hey, you've done it again. You're overscheduling because you're not letting yourself feel your grief. Perhaps your heart's saying, ouch, I'm hurting today. Can you just gently be there, even just for one breath with it? Perhaps you might like to connect into imagery. If how your heart is feeling your grief as a color, what is that color? Or perhaps if it was a weather, what would the weather forecast be saying? Just gently check in and explore what's present. This is how we gently find presence with our grief and start to build a language around our grief. So I'd always recommend journaling as a beautiful practice, or talking about it, perhaps doing this with someone where you can speak about it. And then third up is the beautiful reframe of what your grief is asking of you. Because when we are avoiding our grief, there's that unconscious pull away from it, because we see grief as an inconvenience. That's definitely how society sees grief. Or we see grief as this big scary boogeyman. I can't hold this, it's too painful. But can we reframe grief? Can we reframe grief into grief is just a part of us? It's not all of us, it's a part of us. And just like any part of us, it wants to be heard. It wants to be listened to. It wants to be supported and cared for. And our grief really is asking us to pay attention. When we feel grief coursing through our body, I often can feel, I feel dysregulated. My grief is asking me to slow down, to ground, to go for a walk in nature. Is there some care that your grief is asking of you today? When we're so busy in our lives, we often will not listen to those whispers of our grief and what it really needs from us today. So this ends this episode of Death on the Daily. My daughter is always here in everything that I do, but I have definitely felt her presence. And I'm so grateful for her being here. I'm so grateful for you being here with me, witnessing my story, as well as perhaps witnessing parts of your own. And if this episode resonated with you, I would love if you could hit that subscribe button. That way you won't miss a new episode. And that way you can also support me and my Death on the Daily mission. Plus, I always love connecting on socials and hearing any of your thoughts or anything. So please feel free to connect with me over there. As well as if you would ever like to explore working together, whether that's one-on-one or coming into my Grief Cocoon workshop, which is a beautiful sacred space of ritual, of grief journaling, and of circle sharing, then I would love to see you there. You can head to the show notes for all of those details. But in the meantime, I just want to, with my hand on my heart, just give you all of my griefy solidarity, because I know how difficult this journey can be. And wherever you are in your journey, I'm always here. Death on the Daily is always here. And in griefiest of solidarity, I'm sending you so much love.
Thank you for joining me on Death on the Daily. If you like this episode, it would mean a lot if you could hit subscribe. Plus, head to the show notes to find out about my work as a grief coach, and there's a grief journaling freebie there for you. Until we meet here next time, take good care of yourself and others.
There's a cold fire, there's a crossfire, and there's something